Well, hello there and welcome to the living room of the dollhouse for another reading from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Hugh Stelfers for February 10th, the day of Acclaim. That's right. And here at the top of the page is a visual representational image of the day of Acclaim. We have us an image of, been a little bit of a theme here where we start to take on very singular objects. And here we have, what is it? Boom, it looks to be a ribbon and a bouquet of flowers there. Something you might see at the likes of, I don't know, a horse race, if you like. That's right. At least that's what it reminds me of. Now, does that speak to the day of Acclaim? Well, maybe a little bit, at least insofar as the title's concerned. But a lot of times that has no real bearing on the reading itself. So we'll just take it as an example of what I'm seeing here on the page so you can get more involved with what's going on here. The paradigm, if you like. That said, it's not altogether all too important. But what is important around these here parts is it's February 10th, and hence it's somebody's birthday. And so if that's the case, I just want to say happy birthday. That's right. If it's your birthday, I just want to say happy birthday. But if this video finds you late, as they often tend to do for a lot of folks, well, I hope you had a happy birthday if that's the circumstance. But a lot of times we get a lot of folks in here randomly. They just want to find out about February 10th, or more ideally, we get folks in here who want to celebrate. And so if that's the case, I just want to say hello, welcome, and I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, before I dive in with the redirect, and I will, something I like to do around these here parts, and that is roll some dice. That's right, this is the DykASSt birthday broadcast, so I like to live up to the namesake, but I do so more importantly for synchronicity's sake. And oh my lord, folks, you know what? Rolled another double today. A 6 and a 6 for a 12. This one doesn't show up very often either. Yesterday it was snake eyes, which I think was the first time. Today it's a 6 and a 6 for a 12. Now, what does all that mean? That synchronicity, the dice roll, the numbers. Well, my friends, a lot of the time we get out in the world, and as I hear tell, the universe or the higher powers that be will put things in our path to help us realize our goals or manifest our aspirations. But a lot of times, folks are very singular or narrow of focus. They often have the blinders on to the things that are going on around them. Not to say you don't see things, but you might not take them for what they could be in your life, right? You might not lend them much concern to say those things the universe is putting down in your path for you. So this is just an exercise to help you get the blinders off. Start seeing those things for the value they hold. And how do we do that? Well, by finding a sign that we can't help but notice. All right, so that's where the numbers come in. That's right, your daily numbers. A mutually agreed upon sign between you and the universe. Now, you don't have to go with the numbers I rolled for you. The intention is there, but it probably is ideal you take a set of dice if this is an exercise that you might like to entertain. That said, once you get your dice figured out, pull it out of an old Yahtzee set perhaps, well, you use them to ascribe time limits and directional values with number sets, so you can have even more your hands off the wheel, and the universe kind of taking you for a ride there, if you like. That said, once you've got all that established, pick a place that's near and dear to your heart, or some place maybe you haven't explored. I often like to say the town square, so let's dive back in with that example. Now, when you get into this thing, like I said, you want to get those blinders off, all right? Because something else that might happen is the day might start to take on a little bit of a theme. Let's go with the wreath there and the prize-winning ribbon. I don't know, you might start to see, people carrying something like that down the street there as you're walking around. Or maybe you just happen to see a bunch of flower shops, and maybe they're putting a funeral together and you see a big wreath like that, so they're kind of dedicating to somebody. It doesn't necessarily have to be this exact image, but it's just things like that. Or perhaps you see it in an advertisement on a street corner, or a bus bench, or a big mural up on the side of a building that's painted. You never know. Things like that might start to arise. That said, you get through on your first directional value and time limit. Maybe you're not really seeing much of anything, all right? And you look around, you stop, compose yourself. Again, maybe you're not seeing anything. I often like to say, hey, you know what? Maybe you look up and you just so happen to be on, what's this, 12th Avenue. And I say you like to maybe take that as a sign you're on the right path, even if you haven't seen anything. But let's say in this instance, the street doesn't have anything to do with your numbers. Well, you know what? Again, just kind of take it in stride, see where you're going. Hey, you know what? maybe a bus just so happens to pull up, and there it is. That's the numbers 66 or number 12 line, all right? There's your sign. And maybe you just so happen to have perfect change in your pocket to ride. Now, I know a lot of folks probably don't like to ride the bus, but hey, you know what? Get out of your comfort zone a little bit. See what happens. Get on the bus. See where it takes you. Roll a time value. See how long to ride. And maybe what's this? I mean, at the end of that time value, the bus just drops you off. That's right. Maybe at the horse track. Who's to say? You know what? Maybe you don't like to bet on the ponies, but I don't know. Go on in there. See what you see. All right. You don't necessarily have to, right? But maybe when you get in there, what's this? You see on the board there with the horses that are up for the next race. Well, maybe you see one by the name of Synchronicity. That's right. Hey, you know what? I would have to lay a bet in that case. And maybe it's the underdog. Maybe you stand to win a windfall if and that horse comes in. So you know what? I know I'd place a couple bucks on it, so you make your choice. But in this example, let's say you throw down a Hamilton on it, right? And you get out there, and you've never really done a horse race before, perhaps. I don't know, so you don't really know the rules and the regulations outside of the fact this horse is supposed to win. Now, let's say you wanted it to win, right? And here it comes down to the photo finish, and you know what? Hey, maybe the horse doesn't win. Oh, shoot, where's the synchronicity this guy was talking about, right? So maybe you tear up the ticket like you've seen him do in the movies, and maybe the individual right next to you does the same thing and starts cursing synchronicity. And you're like, hey, that was my horse. And you know what's interesting? Maybe this individual you saw that was right next to you this whole time was somebody you found, I don't know, rather attractive, but you didn't have the gumption to really say anything. I don't know, maybe you're in a relationship or something, who's to say? But you know what? Maybe you find out this particular animal was the one that they bet on also. And so that's your little way in to at least say hi. And they go, you bet on synchronicity too? And you go, yeah, and I don't even bet on ponies, and tell them what you're doing. Yeah. You know what? It's my birthday. This guy on the internet with his video here is rolling dice. It got me here, and you know what? I thought this horse was gonna come in. Hey, you know what? They might just be like, "That's crazy." Maybe you show them this video. I know it's crazy. No, not because of all the synchronicity stuff, and it was the horse's name, but it's my birthday too. Oh, it could happen. It could happen. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe was driving you to meet this individual. Making new friends. I don't know. It could be more than that. Who's to say? But you know what? It's all within the realm of possibility. Hey, maybe at the very least, even if it's not their birthday, they're just apt to join you, all right? Because if anything, things like this, they kind of stir up a little bit of magic. And so you get out there, you start seeing the theme present, whatever the theme might be. Like I said, it doesn't have to be the horse wreath or the ribbon, whatever. But if you do start to see those things, you're going to see the magic, stack up the coincidences and synchronicity. You understand why I brought it up, right? And it's your birthday. You should be out there having a little bit of fun, I would argue. That's it. That's synchronicity in a nutshell, if you like. Hopefully it makes a bit of sense. So let's dive into your birthday read. That's why you're here. All right. Your month is February. Your day is the 10th. Your sign is 20 to 23 degrees Aquarius of the Aquarius III period specifically. And your quality and element is fixed air. Well, all right. February 10th, the day of Acclaim. Those born on February 10 generally seek the widest acceptance available to them, but also like to be appreciated by those in the know. Many born on this day wish for their achievements to be highly prized, right up into the higher echelons of society or culture. More highly evolved February 10 people succeed in attracting recognition without trying too hard or compromising their integrity. Rather, they self-confidently follow a personal vision so intense or imaginative that others are won over. And indeed, this is a highly unusual for February 10 people to change their ways in order to become more popular. Their attitude is basically, take it or leave it. And not that they are necessarily combative or confrontational by any means. It is simply that they only know how to do things their own way and are assured of themselves. And unfortunately, others may well take such an attitude for stubbornness or inflexibility, or stubbornness, rather, more properly said. And those born on this day may therefore have to find a very understanding mate or someone who loves them precisely for their eccentricities, faults, and foibles. And February 10 people are able to touch the emotions of those around them very directly. Yet personally, they are not effuse with their feelings. And somehow they seem to channel all of their energy into impassioned endeavors while retaining a degree of emotional detachment. This objectivity can in fact be the basis for their success. As performers on the stage of life, they recognize that they have a great responsibility to their audience, to say family, friends, associates, and social contacts. And like a pilot flying a plane, they know not to get so carried away that they allow the plane to crash. February 10 people must learn not to always place themselves at the center of attention. Giving others a chance and passing on what they know as models or teachers is an important part of their personal development. The whole question of responsibility is an interesting one for February 10 people. And many born on this day feel an enormous sense of universal responsibility toward both their work and their lives, but perhaps fail to remain accountable to other human beings on the most personal level. They must be aware that family members do not feel ignored, friends taken for granted, or colleagues overlooked. Caring, sharing, sacrificing. These are themes which February 10 people should keep in mind when pursuing their objective goals. And those born on this day run the risk of winding up recognized, lionized, and alone. Yet this fate can be avoided if they acknowledge the warning signs of isolation early on and make changes. And it is never too late for those who have cut themselves off to mend bridges and reach out. And February 10 people have no shortage of empathy for others. It is mostly a matter of orientation as well as awareness. Well, all right. This was a very interesting birthday breakdown for me. This happens to be a very specific kind of day, and on these very specific kind of days, which I'll get into here in a moment, they usually hyper drill down and focus on the theme and then expand out from there as to how it relates to their lives. And here I would say they did that a little bit, but it's very unique in that they rounded it out a lot more than I'm used to on these very specific days. That said, there was a little note I wanted to get into before I dive in with a little bit of a breakdown on the day here, and that was the note of empathy. All right, this came up yesterday specifically, and I found it a little bit synchronistic, if you like to drill back down on that, if you weren't tired of hearing about that already. But I reached for this book the other day, and it was one I hadn't touched in years, and for just whatever reason, I decided to pick it up, and it was Robert Greene's Mastery. He's famous for the 48 Laws of Power book. And I picked back up in the book where I left off years ago, and it was on the subject of social intelligence. And it talked about Ben Franklin and how he would empathize with people in order to not just get his way and be successful, but to relate to folks and then also bolster his own talents and such. And yesterday empathy came up, and I was just like, this is crazy, because that was the exact place I picked up in that book. And here, you know what, today they bring it on through with the through line there of empathy. And so I just couldn't help but think, you know what, it was so synchronistic yesterday, I had to bring it up for you too, because you know what, this seems like an important facet here for you, maybe something that they recommended you drill down on because it might be a little bit lacking, but they said you have the capacity for as much, and I would argue and reckon that it could provide you with a lot of value also. So just something I wanted to note, not saying you got to go buy the book or whatever, but just something real interesting there. So that's what I'd say about empathy and synchronicity there with that stuff. Let's dive in with that little bit of a commentary I mentioned there. Okay, February 10th, the day of Acclaim. All right, you're generally seeking the widest acceptance available, the reading claims, and wishing your achievements to be appreciated, specifically all the way up to the higher societal types, at least apparently, which in no small part has come up in a few days previous, February 5th and February 6th specifically. So a little bit of a theme there kind of standing out in that regard. So one may argue that it's a bit of a through line for Aquarius to some extent. With that in mind, the reading then goes on to say that the higher evolved individuals born on this day who follow a personal vision, ostensibly, they do so without the aims of standing out because they're just going to attract that attention regardless. Because it's kind of baked into the formula that considering there's so much passion thrown at the endeavor, I would say, based on how I was reading it. But they take that added facet away, or that added value of not having compromised themselves for the sole purpose or the ends of getting into some kind of recognition with the higher societal types. And maybe that's what's missing there. They're not focused on the popularity thing because that's ostensibly taken a little bit of their focus away from the work. So maybe that's why that higher evolved status is kind of in there. They're focused on themselves and the work. All right. The reading claims it's highly unusual for you to change your ways to become more popular. So sounds like there's a plateau element to it going. So there's a bit of a difference between you and February 6th specifically. So you get a little bit of it, but not a lot there. But also, as it happens, this take it or leave it kind of attitude is something that has presented earlier in the period as well. So here there's a very early example of a vacillating kind of nature insofar as traits that kind of pop up and then disappear within Aquarius. And in a lot of cases, they're not something that are similar to other things. To say like, Aquarius generally has these things going on for it, these things going on for it. Here it's like back forth, at least the way I'm interpreting it. So it's something that's happened enough to where I'm starting to pick up on it, on the vacillating aspect being a trait here. That said, you're said to be self-assured individuals who may be a bit stubborn and inflexible, and because of this, it's recommended you find a mate who loves you precisely for those eccentricities. And while this sounds rather common sense, I would say, it's a very specific recommendation because a lot of folks here, even in this period, they might have similar interests that are recommended for them to find in a mate. Whereas a couple of the others were said to find somebody who has interests that are the opposite or who have personality traits that are completely opposite so that the two individuals can bolster each other. And it's very interesting that you get one that's so specific about someone who loves you for the things that are ostensibly faults in your nature there. So again, I thought it seemed kind of common sense, but not necessarily. All right. So again, here we go. Some emphasis on this vacillating swing of seeming to be an Aquarius through line kind of trait. It's at least a chief example to me. I don't know. It might not hold water with anybody else's opinion there. So to say some periods that there doesn't seem to be a lot of dynamic variation with things, but here there does. All right. If I wasn't clear before. What else do we have? You're also said to be directly in touch with your emotions there, but you're not free and loose with them, or you're directly in touch with other people's emotions there. I don't think it said anything about you being in touch with yours, but you might not play so fast and loose with your emotions, they said. And they also said that it helps contribute to your success because you're more objective, to say. But in being the center of attention here, the reading recommends that you start giving back to others, all right, insofar as passing on your knowledge and also being more open and giving of your energy, or at least the energy that you devote to your passions or your endeavors, kind of back to those you care about or those people in your lives. And so this is a very specific Capricorn quality, as it turns out. And it sounds like you have the nature to have huge success the same way that they do because they're so focused on their particular their cause and their endeavor. But for them, they don't necessarily have the baked-in ability to go in and flourish within their personal lives, if that makes any sense. It's so innate that they're driven to their cause that it's almost they have to make it a life's mission to be able to open up to their personal side of life. Here I got the idea that it's well within your nature to have both, but you just tend to land on going after the endeavor. So there is a similar Capricorn quality, but I also think you have a little bit of a leg up on them, the way I read it. So anyway, I thought that was interesting to kind of relate, and added a little bit of something extra here into the page or into the book because I ran out of space on the page for this to be a very interesting birthday breakdown. The whole host of reasons why. But what the one that stands out in my mind, like I said, is that it largely reads like a Capricorn day. All right, insofar as your dedication to passion, but the potential cost of everything else. They even said you might end up alone, and that pops up quite a bit with Capricorns as well. But whereas with Caps, like I said, it's more guaranteed that they're going to lean into that thing. Whereas for you, it's just a potential type thing if you're not mindful of it. But that said, let's get into the reasons why I said this was a very specific day as we shift and turn our attention to your numbers and your planets. That's right. Here we go. Let me get the book back centered there. Those born on the 10th of the month are ruled by the number 1 and the sun. Those ruled by the number 1 like to be first in what they do, which in the case of February 10 people may mean being highly controlling of their environment. The sun tends to grant the qualities of warm and a well-developed ego with a distinctly human, positive orientation to life. See, there's that capacity there. And February 10 people as Aquarians are also ruled by the planet Uranus, which may color the sun's radiance with a distinctly intellectual and nervous cast. And those ruled by the number 1 have sharply defined and sometimes intransigent views on most subjects. And February 10 people can be indeed extremely stubborn. All right, now I brought up this day being highly specific there, so let's dive into the notes here, see if I can make my case for you. All right, the numbers and the planets, all right? You got the number 1 in the sun for a drive to be first in what you do. And it also said to take the form of being highly controlling of your environment. A so-called sun trait, here the reading claims, but I'm very hard-pressed to recall when or if ever I read that the Sunday people are stubborn or intransigent, like they said. See, the sun-ruled day, I mean, not to say it doesn't apply, but a sun-ruled day, as it comes up in the numbers and planets, well, they usually are... They're said to represent creative energy and fire. That seems to be the boilerplate. But for you today, you got stubborn and intransigent, the same thing ostensibly. And then what was the other thing? Highly controlling of your environment. Like I said, I don't think I've seen this in here before, and if I have, it only came up once or twice. Not enough for me to remember it. But I would say both of them seem to speak to you based on the breakdown, the creative energy and fire, as well as being stubborn and highly controlling. All right. Now, typically sun-ruled days, like I said earlier, they hyper drill down on the theme, and even to the point where it colors every aspect of the things that are described or gone over. And you did get a focus within the theme of, for sure, I would argue. But strangely enough, it was far more rounded out, in my opinion, than maybe any other Sunday I've seen, all right? Or it was our sun-ruled day that I've seen. And maybe not, but you know what? It stands out in being one that wasn't hyper-drilled down and focused upon. What else do I have to say here? So they said well-developed ego and stubbornness, assuming it applies. But also what's interesting is the planet Uranus is said to shake up and electrify the day that it's in a co-rulership with. And that might explain why, you're starting to get other typical traits that aren't necessarily found in those other sun-ruled days. That having said, my argument doesn't really hold much water, and not that you would know this, but the last sun-ruled day, again, it didn't speak to any of this, the stubbornness or the high control there. Again, not necessarily saying it doesn't apply, it just didn't bring it up. So it's just something of note that I found quite interesting. A little bit of a disconnect, or maybe they're just highly personalizing it for you. Maybe those traits to the authors stood out more than the creative intelligence. I don't know. But I would argue creative intelligence spoke to you also, like I said. So in any event, that's been your numbers and your planets. So let's move on to your tarot card. That's right, one of the more eclectic of the New Age metaphysical ideologies, but hey, it's here in the book. So, I don't know, let's see what it has to say. Sometimes we can make connotations, further connections with the reading. So let's see if that happens to be the case, and then leave it in the book. We don't have to go home and start dealing the cards out to, predict our future or whatever. So let's see what she has to say here. In the major arcana, the 10th card is the Wheel of Fortune, which symbolizes the ups and downs, wins and losses, and successes and failures of life. Learning to live with and handle occasional failure will be a special challenge for February 10 people. And the card signifies a reversal in fortune and teaches that there is nothing permanent except change. All right, the Wheel of Fortune. What do I have to say about it? The Wheel of Fortune. This is a once-a-month card. Only pops up once a month, whereas a lot of the other cards, they get repeated, all right? What else do we have here? It's taken to represent and to teach that nothing is permanent in life except change. And surprisingly, all right, this doesn't happen usually, they included a little bit of a personalization here for a famously sparse card. I think that this boilerplate aspect here with the Wheel of Fortune, they haven't changed before. Also, they barely included anything in it. That's pretty boilerplate for a tarot card entry, well, for the Wheel of Fortune entry. But what's also kind of typical for a tarot card entry, no personalization, all right? Sometimes they do it, most times they don't. And for you, they did personalize a little bit. So there you go. You can take that away with it. Now, I picked up on a little bit of themes of failure and success and changes in the breakdown. But you may be surprised at how often such things in the cards speak to or almost seemingly inform the breakdown as it's written. And aside from mentioning how such changes can be difficult for you to handle, I didn't really pick up on much of an apt speaking to the breakdown there with the Wheel of Fortune. Just doesn't happen sometimes, and this happens to be one of those days. What I did pick up on, though, and this might not hold any water either, is that it seems to speak to, and at least it brings to my mind, that aspect of the Aquarius in the vacillating swings of qualities that come in and out and seem to apply to one day, but not at all the next. And just there's no common through line there, even if it's just a little bit. It's just wildly different, all right? So it kind of spoke to me in that regard. Changes and failures and successes. In and out. I don't know. So I know that's not typically, well, maybe I don't know, but that's not typically where I drill down on the tarot, but it seemed to speak to that to no small extent. So that said, that's been your tarot. Not a lot to pull from with the subject matter of the Wheel of Fortune. This one's always kind of hard to relate, but hopefully you took some value from it. So that said, that's been your tarot. Let's move on to your health. All right, your health. Those born on February 10 must try to calm their nervous system, as they can be very jumpy at times and extremely vulnerable to stress. All right, and because their brains are so active, they may have problems sleeping and getting enough rest in general. Sufficient energy should be put into making their homes truly restful places. And within that home, having a private sanctuary sealed off from the demands of the world. And as far as diet is concerned, those born on this day do well eating whatever their fancy dictates, within certain health limits, of course. A wide-ranging, freewheeling attitude toward food is fine, but they must find time for relaxed meal times. And as far as exercise is concerned, only light to moderate physical activity is recommended. All right, hey, as if we weren't drilling down on another theme, they shook up your health entry a little bit. It's typically written in certain ways, and the past few days they've been changing it up a little bit, and they did that for you here too, no small extent here. Obviously, for you, if you're like first time you're seeing this, it probably doesn't mean much. You're not seeing anything, but something I was picking up on, so something I took of interest with. So let's get into your health here. You're highly active. You have highly active brains, apparently. You also can be jumpy, nervous, and prone to a stressful nature. The stressful nature makes a lot of sense considering how dedicated you may be to your job. Surprisingly little was mentioned in the breakdown with regard to being nervous or jumpy or having an active brain. So it's a little interesting that this get put off to the health. Not saying it doesn't apply, just interesting it didn't come up. But this focus of making your home a restful sanctuary, all right, and emphasizing the point about the stress, that's not something that comes up all that often. It does on occasion, but to best of my recollection, it usually pops up with a Neptune ruled day. I might be totally wrong on that, but that's kind of where I remember it coming up because they're dreamy individuals there. And they need their dream time and their sleep. So I don't remember if I'm remembering that right, but it has come up once in a while here. So it's interesting it pops up for you. Because again, like I said, I didn't necessarily pick up that you were highly stressed out, the breakdown. So it might just be that it's Uranus and it's, what do you call it, electrifying the sun to no small part. So maybe that's how it's realized, a little bit of this stress, and you need to ground yourself a little bit. What else did they say? They didn't really mention a diet outside of a freewheeling, something that you can just be fast and loose with from the sounds of it. Though they did say to make it healthy. But what is that really saying? And so real quick, I'll just dive into the Aquarius body areas, which are the circulatory system and the lower legs and ankles. But I have to kind of segue back into Capricorn for a moment, whose body areas were the veins and the skeleton. Now, Capricorn was pretty religious. They would drill down on cutting out animal fats and dairy fats. And kind of an earthy, what do you call it, healthy vegetables, whole grains, bulk foods, or bulk wheat and stuff like that and the like, help keep them grounded. And by and large, to cut out cholesterol, because the veins are the body area. For you, the circulatory system's a body area, so lend some credence to the fact that, hey, let's cut out some cholesterol. I think one of the only real true food recommendations I've seen was to maybe cut out a little bit of red meat, ostensibly for your heart health. But I have seen a lot of avoidance of stimulants as well as tobacco and alcohol, again, ostensibly for what you call heart health, but also for those nervous types because they get a little too overstimulated. So surprising that this didn't pop up in here either, especially with tobacco. They bring that up with nervous types on occasion. What else? Also in the Aquarius, very specific to Aquarius, they bring up embolism and stroke, and to do things to avoid that. So I've been mentioning folks get compression socks, maybe head that off at the pass before their late age and it's too late. What else they say? Lower legs and ankles. So, you're killing two birds with one stone, that being a body area. As far as exercise is concerned, they mention light to moderate. And you know what? That doesn't get mentioned all that often. And quite interestingly, the through line for Aquarius so far has just been moderate. They haven't really been saying much. On occasion, they'll talk about finding a grounding, kind of walking or swimming, or on occasion they've brought up sports and such. But here they didn't really mention much of that for you outside of moderate to light activity. And so once again, that might be on account of this Sun or Uranus dynamic being hyper intense or stressful or causing these particular issues for you. So maybe that light to moderate is to help offset that a little bit. I can only really guess because that's how they drilled down on that. Or perhaps there's a historical precedent with the folks who were born in this period. But I take that particular stance because a lot of the times in the Mars case, which is very aggressive and god of war-like tendencies for their particular nature, they would get combative sports or aggressive, vigorous forms of exercise. And it seemed to be a bit of a common denominator with those. Though in this period, when Mars comes up and it's coupled to Uranus, well, they've been getting moderate exercise. So it might be that Uranus is shaking things up to that extent. Who's to say? They don't actually mention context with any of this stuff, so I just kind of have to go by impulse or instinct as to why they're bringing it up. That said, that's been your health, so let's move on to some advice. All right, your advice. Don't overlook small matters, all right? Simple tasks can help your abstract nature. And avoid getting too carried away, all right? At least by the scope of your endeavors. And remember to attend to what is directly in front of you. Oh, that last piece of advice was just for me, it would seem. I had too much going on off screen and my attention wasn't on the advice there. Oh, yeah, I read it all correct for you regardless. Okay, what did I have to say about what they had to say here? I had to write it in the book, so please bear with me. My writing is tiny here. So they said don't let the small matters get in the way. And, simple tasks can help your abstract nature. I say it speaks to staying grounded and probably staying in tune with what's going on around you, all right? Because you might be so focused on those endeavors of yours. And as we mentioned with Capricorn, they get distracted with their endeavors. And it sounds like you have a penchant to do some similar things. So maybe taking time to recognize the minutiae of life. That's kind of what it sounds like they're trying to say for you here. And it might help to speak to matters and reframe them for you, especially if things are getting a little bit out of sight. And sometimes folks can get a little too myopic too. They're too focused on what's in front of them. So I don't know. Find a balance. Finding balance often comes up, so does measuring out your energy. And so if you're lending too much of it to your endeavors, think about maybe throwing it around a little bit there. You'll like. All right, what else did they say? Let me find it. Avoid getting carried away with the scope of things. All right, the breakdown spoke to this both in terms of your work and your universal approach to responsibility. So let that scope get too big, and you're apt to get overwhelmed, I would say, which then dovetails into seeing the minutia in no small part. So bring things down a little bit, narrow that focus. What else do we have here? Attend to what's in front of you. Okay, here we go. And they're just getting redundant now, I would say. Okay, outside of me being what I said about me focusing on it. But let's not assume it's lazy writing. Okay, that's kind of where my mind went to first. All right, and these guys don't typically do that. Usually, advice very valuable. I'm not saying it's not valuable here. But maybe, just maybe, it's that important for you to focus on these things all in the same vein, all right? But maybe it just bears being reframed for you so that they make sure that you hear it. Sometimes we got to hear things 37 different times before it takes. Maybe in your case, you got to hear it in a myriad of different ways that relate the same idea before you're like, oh, that would make sense. I don't know. That's just what it kind of spoke to me about it. So that having been said, that's been your advice. So let's move on to your meditation. All right. It's your birthday. You get a meditation. Here we go. Acceptance and universal values are important, but so are washing the dishes and mopping the floor. Oh, I like this one. What I like to call chopping wood and carrying water. Helps to ground you, all right? I might be saying too much, okay? I don't typically like to inform the meditation. Here we go. Once more. Acceptance and universal values are important, but so are washing the dishes and mopping the floor. All right. Your birthday, your meditation, I'm not going to influence it any more than I probably already have, so it's just for you otherwise. Outside of me already probably coloring it for you, which I didn't mean to do, but you know what? It spoke to me that much. Hopefully it speaks to you as well. So again, hopefully I didn't color it for you too much. I hope you take some value from that. But your meditation in the can, as it were, let's move on to your strengths and your weaknesses. I said you were objective, so let's hold up the objective mirror and see where we got the girth and where we're otherwise, I don't know, a little more deflated, if you like. All right, your strengths, your individual, your self-confidence, and you're empathetic. Nice. They mentioned that. I didn't know if it'd come up in the strengths or not. But your weaknesses, let's hold that objective mirror back up and flip it to the side that blows up your face. All right? Maybe it shows you where you're a little more, I don't know, subjectively insecure there. Or maybe superficially is more apt to say within the metaphor. Probably so. All right, so your weaknesses. You're nervous, you're self-involved, and you're removed. Oh, okay. Hey, you know what? Not stuff we haven't heard before. That's not news now, is it? And a lot of times I like to say that our strengths can also be weaknesses, vice versa. There was a day, I would say maybe a couple months back, impulsive came up as a strength. The very next day, it was a weakness, all right? And I'm thinking to myself, where's the disconnect? How can one day to the next change it so much? Well, I think it just depends on the individual and, in any particular case, the circumstance, all right? Sometimes weaknesses can be strengths. For you, your weaknesses were nervous, self-involved, and removed. Well, hey, you know what? I would argue that your endeavors, the things that make you popular, they're not going to be what they ultimately are unless you're self-involved and removed. And I don't know about the nervous aspect, but hey, that might color it in a certain way. And if you weren't nervous, maybe there was a little bit too much self-confidence into it, and people would look at it and go, this isn't your typical work. I don't know. So in those regards, it could be a strength. That said, I don't think that's what they mean, but that's kind of my argument for it. I would say these things are something that you need to rein in a little bit, but I also like to argue that your strengths are going to help you do it if you need that. You're self-confident. Hey, you know what? You're going to tackle this thing by yourself. but you're also empathetic. You know what? If people pick up on that and they realize it, I would argue you're probably going to be able to get them on your side to help you with these things if you need so. Also, individual, you're going to have a very highly interesting way of approaching how to solve these particular issues. But I also like to argue, you know what, your weaknesses make you who you are, so don't get rid of them altogether. And I would say that dovetails nicely into the argument I had to say. It's your work is going to be what your work is because of your weaknesses a little bit, I would say. But also, who's to say maybe that work gets even stronger if you improve upon your weaknesses? Who's to say? But that's been your strengths and your weaknesses, so let's move on to those born on this day. And when we get into those born on this day, not only do we get to see who shares your company, but something I like to do is look at it from the perspective of figuring out our passions. It kind of sounded like it was baked into the bargain that you already know what that is, but I would argue that can't always be the case. And so I like to focus on it for this reason alone, because, you know, I think it's important that people find a passion, something to live for, something to dedicate their time to, a purpose, or something outside of work, all right? And hopefully with the angle of turning it into your work. Too often I get out in the world and meet folks who, you know, they get into a job that they don't necessarily like because they got to make ends meet. And it was the first one that came along. And maybe over time they start climbing that corporate ladder. It's getting easier. They're putting it on autopilot, filling the coffers. Maybe they don't even have to do much of anything because everybody below them is doing all the work. But that said, the fatal flaw, it probably has nothing to do with what they like to do, if they even know what they like to do. Sometimes it's hard to figure that out. It takes time, energy, and you know what, at the end of the week, maybe you don't have the time, the energy to put into it. So again, I think it's important that we're trying to carve out some time to do as much. And hopefully, hearing what other folks did on your birthday and what got them in the book will drive up the fires, that creative intelligence we mentioned that wasn't mentioned in the numbers and planets for you, all right? So it gets you after chasing down your passions. Because if there's anything I can wish for someone on their birthday, it's that they're driving down the track to start figuring that out. But again, if you've got that figured out already, well then, you know, the hat I'm not wearing is off to you, all right? And then we can just see who shares your birthday. So let's dive into it, all right? We have Bernd Hold Brecht, a German poet, playwright, and the writer of musical dramas with Kurt Weill, and is responsible for Threepenny Opera. We also have Boris Pasternak, a Nobel Prize-winning Russian poet. We also have, and it says he refused the award there, and he was the novelist of Dr. Zhivago. We also have Stella Adler, a method acting teacher and founder of the Stella Adler Conservatory of Acting. We also have Leontine Prince, a concert and opera soprano. Mark Spitz, the U.S. Olympic swimmer and won 11 gold medals and the most ever of 7, it says, at a single Olympics, and set 23 world records. I imagine that record's probably been broken. I don't remember. Was it Michael Phelps certainly won a few of them, but this book was written about 30 years ago, so maybe that's why. We also have Roberta Flack, a singer, arranger, and a pianist. Adelina Patti, an Italian 19th century concert operatic soprano. We also have Cesar Siepi, Metropolitan Opera lead basso. We also have Chick Webb, drummer and a big band leader, and it says died the age of 30. So it's certainly got his name stamped on the cultural zeitgeist, even at that early of an age. So it is possible, all right? We also have Laura Dern, the film actress, Greg Norman, the Australian golfer, and called the White Shark. Well, that's an interesting nickname. We also have Charles Harold Macmillan, British Prime Minister, Jimmy Durante, a comedian and a film actor. We also have Robert Wagner, a film and TV actor of It Takes a Thief and Heart to Heart. We also have Alan Hale Sr., a film actor in close to 200 films, it says. John Enders was a U.S. Nobel Prize-winning virologist. We also have Alex Comfort, a British medical biologist and writer of The Joy of Sex. And we also have Murray Weidenbaum, an economist, William Congreve, a British playwright and poet, and Charles Lamb, a British essayist and critic, and responsible for a work by the name of Tales from Shakespeare. All right, we had a lot of opera folks in there, and I might be wrong, but there was a little opera that I starred in by the name of A Street Scene, and they may have been this Bertolt Brecht and Kurt Weill. They might have been responsible for that. I can't recall who wrote it, but that was like the first acting job I ever had. I starred as Mr. Sankey, the milkman who was having an affair with the woman in the opera apartment there. I know that doesn't have anything or any bearing on your birthday. I just, you know what, I had to bring it up because it was a very interesting project, to be sure. So try to look up Street Scene if you can. I don't know. That having been said, they also had a lot of athletes, actors, so a whole gamut of people to take inspiration from. Creative intelligence for sure, I would say. So it's a jarring anomaly that they didn't include that in the numbers in Planet's entry, to be sure, I would say. But that having been said, I think I butchered a couple names in there. I must have, so let's make up for it on my side of things. It's not done in malice, it's just hooked on phonics. Doesn't always work for me. It's not the best tool to be used to pronounce names. That having been said, this has been Those Born on This Day, which essentially rounds out your birthday reading. Except to say, your season is winter, your sign once again is Aquarius, of the Aquarius III period specifically, and your quality and elements is fixed air. And what does that mean? Well, that's a different video altogether. I'll leave it at the end if you're interested. But this has been February 10th, the day of Acclaim, from The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and you, Stelfers. I have an affiliate link for this book down in the description, right above a personal message I'm leaving for the birthday boys and girls, ladies and gents. So if you're interested in picking up a copy, it'll save you the hassle of having to type it in a browser there, and it supports the channel in the bargain. This thing makes an excellent coffee table book for when you have company over and maybe you don't want to do the heavy lifting to get the ice broken. It's going to do that twofold, considering people are going to find it of interest, for better or worse, and considering its girth. It's going to be able to break some ice with that for sure. That having been said, the book having been relayed, that's not altogether all too important here, because like I said at the top, what's important around here, wishing you a happy birthday. So once again, happy birthday, all right? And for everybody else who joined us today out of interest or to celebrate the day, I hope you enjoyed yourselves and you join us for your birthday reading, all right? Now, lest I forget, that's right, your daily numbers. Get out there, stoke the fires there, you drum up some synchronicity, some coincidences if you like, stack them up, and you understand why I brought it up, all right? Especially if you see taste, touch, smell, intuit, even just a little bit of the magic that I tried to relate to you, all right? Let's get out there, have some fun. It's your birthday. Get your steps in, that light to moderate exercise they recommended. But having said all of that, I just want to say thank you for the pleasure of your time. It's been a privilege to share your birthday with you. I enjoy doing these things, if you couldn't tell. So, yeah, I just want to thank you for your time. But once again, I just want to say happy birthday. All right? Take care of yourselves and don't neglect that empathy. That's right. All right? And sharing your time with others. All right? Not everything's about the job. That's for sure. So get out there and have some fun, all right? And share your birthday, too. Maybe the perfect opportunity to start expanding out with those folks that you might have been neglecting. Assuming that's even the case. Let's hope it isn't, all right? Once again, happy birthday. Take care.